Hey, what's going on, guys? Arekkz here, and today I want to talk about Breath of the Wild 2. This is a game that is incredibly close to my heart. I mean, it's not out yet, but Zelda in and of itself is my number one favourite franchise, and for a game, or for a series, should I say, that is my all-time favourite, I don't often get a chance to speak about it on the channel, so today I wanted to speak about some of the recent Breath of the Wild rumours. Obviously, Nintendo Directs have got a little bit quiet lately, especially with the most recent Paper Mario reveal just being in a trailer in itself and not being included in a Direct. There are definitely some, quiet times ahead, and, if rumours are to be believed, then it might be, the end of summer before Nintendo starts speaking about some of the stuff they have planned, but either way, today I want to speak a little bit about the Breath of the Wild rumours, round up kind of everything we have right now, talk about what we know to be confirmed, some of the stuff that you could of course take with a pinch of salt, and just in general, round up some of the stuff for those of you guys that have been maybe out the loop or just haven't been following it too much, because honestly they haven't said much beyond the initial reveal trailer, so you'll be completely forgiven if you haven't necessarily been kind of keeping up to date on absolutely everything. So if you guys do enjoy this, then a like will be super appreciated. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys hope to see the most in the Breath of the Wild 2 sequel. Let me know what your number one most requested feature is, the thing you definitely want to see included in the next game. And of course, if you do want to stay up to date on all of our future videos, whether that be Zelda, Nintendo videos, or other games, then be sure to turn on those notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Now, starting from the top, Breath of the Wild rumours. Obviously, this year there is no E3, at least not in the conventional sense. There are lots of companies doing things around that typical window, but there is no E3 in the traditional sense. Rather interestingly, it was said that the next Breath of the Wild 2 trailer was originally supposed to show at the Game Awards last year, but due to the kind of Pokemon controversy at the time, they didn't really want to drop it and then have people comparing overworlds and whatnot, so, for one reason or another, that was supposedly shelved. And obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, Nintendo have been pretty quiet recently, and a recent report from VentureBeat suggested that the traditional June E3 Direct window, which Nintendo have always used for their Nintendo Direct presentations, supposedly because of the remote working conditions, given the current situation and whatnot, they have made things more difficult for Nintendo. So the rumours suggest that it may well be the end of summer when Nintendo next have a big announcement. It's also worth noting that this year is supposedly going to be much more focused on Mario. This year is, of course, Mario's 35th anniversary. We, of course, know there are supposed to be a load of remasters, things like Sunshine, Galaxy 64 coming to the Nintendo Switch, and that doesn't necessarily mean to say there can't be Zelda news this year, but it's fair to say that this year is probably going to be a much larger focus on Mario. However, that aside, if rumours are to be believed, then apparently Breath of the Wild 2 is still moving along quite nicely. Of course, it's built in the same engine, it's built in the same overworld, it is confirmed to be using the same world, and as a result of that, apparently development is moving along quite nicely. But what do we actually know? So, under the confirmed stuff, Eiji Aonuma, of course, spoke about the team's desire to return to the established Hyrule from Breath of the Wild to incorporate new gameplay and story into that world. We know this to be true. We know that this is, of course, Breath of the Wild 2 will see us back in the world that we knew before, and this apparently grew from an overabundance of ideas for the DLC. Initially, Breath of the Wild 2 basically came out from the fact that they had so many ideas, they couldn't just release them as DLCs, they instead decided to create a sequel to the game. So, again, it's definitely the same Link, definitely the same Zelda, just fast forward a few years. The sequel is being directed by Fujibayashi, the same man that took the wheel of the previous game, as well as several other previous entries in the series, and supposedly way back then he took inspiration from things like Skyrim, and it's said that a lot of the younger members of the team, younger staff members, have also been taking inspiration from Red Dead Redemption 2 when the sequel was planned. Quite how that inspiration will manifest in the second game will of course remain to be seen, and it's also known from Aonuma that this game is going to be considerably darker than any of the ones before, even more so than Majora's Mask. So, that is what we know to be confirmed. So let's move on to the rumour stuff. Obviously, huge speculation here. Anything within this section you should take with a massive pinch of salt, but it is still worth talking about some of it because some of it is actually quite interesting. Starting off with the release date stuff. So, last year, there was a leaker from WCCF Tech, a Mr. Sabi, who suggested that Breath of the Wild 2 was initially slated for 2020, but of course warned that given that Zelda release dates are historically delayed, that might not come to pass. And it seems that was right, because the leaker has since claimed that Breath of the Wild 2 has been delayed and is likely in 2021. Now, obviously, anyone can say that. They can say, hey, it's coming out this year. Nope, by the way, I'm changing my story, it's coming out next year. However, it is worth noting, Breath of the Wild 1, of course, launched in March 2017. That's a Q1 window for 2021. Of course, if Nintendo's big focus this year is on Mario for the 35th anniversary, that would make sense. It's also worth noting that next year, February, is Zelda's 35th anniversary, so maybe this is the big year for Mario, next year is the big year for Zelda. Honestly, kind of selfish to say, I would be quite happy to wait until next year because I want Zelda to release in a window where nothing else happens. I don't want to have any interruptions. I want to sit down and play my Zelda, and with loads of new consoles coming out this year, loads of other stuff happening, I would be quite happy if they drop it in like the March window with nothing else around it, so I can sit there, lock myself away, and play Zelda in peace. There are, of course, additional rumours that there are more Zelda titles in development too. Keep in mind, Nintendo have multiple different teams. Supposedly there is a 2D Zelda game in development, a remaster, a previously mentioned mobile title, and Arekkz even expressed interest in applying their learnings from online games in like Hyrule Warriors to the Breath of the Wild engine. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be doing online in Breath of the Wild 2. It could also mean maybe they have plans for a spin-off, kind of like a Four Swords-esque title in, say, the Breath of the Wild engine. That would be fantastic. I loved Four Swords, and if they did like a multiplayer side thing or like a additional component where you could just use the physics of the Breath of the Wild engine but in a multiplayer setup, honestly, that would be fantastic. But either way, that much is just, adding on to the things they're currently working on. But it's worth noting, all of this stuff could have been delayed given the current situation. So let's move on to talk about the world. So we know for certain that, again, the game is going to be taking place in the same overworld as Breath of the Wild 1. This much has been confirmed in interviews, but some of the rumours that we have give us a better idea as to how Nintendo plan to make this world different. According to McViker, who is predominantly known for rumours surrounding Valve titles, he also has like a Nintendo channel now, but he's been pretty reliable in the past, so, again, you can potentially lean on this one slightly more so. He said that unlike the first part, this game will of course be slightly more linear at the beginning, because canonically, Link already knows Hyrule. There's no need to, set up towers and climb around because you know the land. Instead, the developers have actually filled the world with, supposedly, miasmic versions of Ganon, and until that infection is cleared from a location, you will not actually be able to move freely around the rest of Hyrule. Of course, keep in mind this is the beginning of the game. It's going to start off more linear to kind of funnel you in. I would strongly imagine it would then open up much later on. In this regard, it said that locations are actually worked out to be much deeper than in the original. At the very least, it hints at the appearance of dungeons, which again, we saw that in the initial release trailer, or the reveal trailer, should I say, where, it kind of zooms into this dungeon. And that is, to be fair, one of the biggest things that was missing from Breath of the Wild 1. Breath of the Wild 1 is one of my all-time favourite Zelda games, one of my all-time favourite video games. However, the distinct lack of dungeons in the traditional sense is one of the things that is, in my opinion, the weaker part of the game, because the Divine Beast didn't quite do it. The shrines were mini dungeons, and if you applied those puzzles on a considerably larger scale and had a fully fledged dungeon like lots of mini shrines, that could make for some incredible gameplay experiences. So obviously a larger focus on dungeons would be pretty cool. And they said, of course, with this, they'll be spread throughout the world. In general, he said that while designing the world of Breath of the Wild 2, developers were inspired again by Red Dead Redemption 2 and another untitled game. It's also said that there are going to be huge craters in the ground with elements of the map now floating in the sky. We of course saw that towards the end of the reveal trailer with Hyrule Castle coming out of the ground, and supposedly where these craters are created, beneath, the land masses that have left them, supposedly they will then be filled with new areas to explore, areas to go underground. Potentially that's where the dungeons will go. Supposedly some of these craters will also be filled with water and different land masses to effectively give us different areas to explore, which would certainly make sense because it would then address the concern that if we're reusing the entire overworld for Hyrule, a map we previously have kind of come to know back to back, then adding in a ton of new areas, a ton of new places we previously couldn't explore would of course then lend itself to making it feel like a new environment. I mean, imagine going around the world where there's like a hefty new crater where, I don't know, a previous village was situated and you can then go underground into a mysterious dungeon. That would be fantastic. Additionally, rumours about the Breath of the Wild sequel suggest that we could be in for a treat in the form of a new map that's not like anything we've seen from Zelda before. What's more, a couple of new job listings also suggest that Nintendo are looking for people to work on designing some more dungeons, hidden bosses, things like that. So if the game has, additional hidden bosses and things off the beaten track that, don't necessarily follow the golden line, that could also be quite exciting. There is, of course, also the theory around the Twilight Realm. Supposedly, if you again look at the reveal trailer, the glowing sort of blue hand of the trailer is one of the biggest clues that we may be seeing more from the Twilight, the shadow people that descended from the Hylians who tried to take the power of the Triforce for themselves. The hand is, of course, wrapped in these twisting shapes reminiscent of the Twilight architecture, and of course, the swirling magic could, again, keep in mind, potentially, none of this is confirmed, all of it's theory, everything's up in the air, but could potentially remind people of the portals that let the Twilight invade Hyrule back in 2006. We of course know that the Breath of the Wild's dev team originally toyed with the idea of an alien invasion for Breath of the Wild, admittedly a little bit out there, but it was in the original plans, and seeing shadowy creatures teleport out of the sky, this could well have been what they planned all along. Further to that, some of these Zelda fans on the Reddit went full on Sherlock Holmes, and Retrofunk, one of the users, he pieced together a pretty convincing theory regarding the Twilight Princess villain Zant, of course the Twilight who served Ganondorf in the game. Apparently, if you listen to the trailer's audio in reverse, there are certain notes that seem to echo the music that plays during your final encounter with Zant, who was of course defeated, and he was then adamant that he will return through the power of his god. So it may well be there is that kind of link to it, so that much we'll again have to wait and see, but any of those kind of mysterious links will always make for some pretty exciting story elements. There is also a rumour going around. Admittedly, this one is probably the heaviest pinch of salt of them all, simply because it comes from 4chan. Not exactly the most reputable place, but I still want to speak about it anyway because it does link nicely in with, say, some of the fan theories, and that is that there will supposedly be a playable Zelda, to an extent. This also comes alongside a supposed title rumour, being the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Triforce. Admittedly, the logo they made looks completely fake, so I don't really believe that in the slightest. However, that rumour did say that Zelda would supposedly be playable in dungeons and dungeons alone. She will supposedly travel around the world with you, and when you go into dungeons, you can then swap to her, and she can help Link solve puzzles, and apparently she can harness the power of nature, such as changing the weather, things like that. Yes, a little bit out there. There's of course no corroboration. Again, 4chan isn't exactly known for being reliable, but there is nothing to suggest playable Zelda isn't a possibility. I mean, when you look at the trailer, she of course is travelling with Link in what looks like it could be some kind of dungeon. The new shorter haircut is definitely a more sort of potentially combat focused haircut. You know, having that bob would then maybe lend herself quite nicely to having equipment on her back, that kind of thing. And of course, when you factor in the previous Zelda games have had, you know, elements where we played as different characters in certain sections, you know, not necessarily for the entirety, but of course lending itself to swapping between characters, that could still be a pretty cool take on it. You know, when you factor in the physics engine paired with different abilities, I could see there being some quite fun dungeons, having the ability to kind of like play as different characters, go to certain areas, turn on switches, open doorways, you know, that kind of thing. It would definitely work out quite nicely, and I don't think anybody would be against the idea of having her playable. But supposedly, according to this rumour, it's only in dungeons. When you're out in the open world, you are just Link. Also, another thing is that supposedly animals will also play a bigger role, and if it's to be believed that Zelda can then control and harness nature, then those two things kind of go hand in hand. There will also supposedly be a few new items. You know, one of the things that wasn't present in Breath of the Wild, plenty of things that you can pick up, you know, different items that can break and whatnot. But one of the other things that I missed the most was going into, you know, iconic dungeons and getting that particular signature item. I understand the reason behind not introducing it in Breath of the Wild, but principally having that introduced would be quite nice. Supposedly there's a slingshot, we've seen these before, and some kind of plow style weapon that Link can then use to attack different groups of enemies. Perhaps that'll tie into the mystical kind of green magical hand we've seen on him before. Maybe that can take different forms of different items, a la the kind of Sheikah Slate. Again, we'll have to wait and see. Furthermore, there is supposedly going to be two different modes, two different difficulty modes this time around. This of course ties in with the fact that Nintendo are always trying to make their games as fun and enjoyable and as accessible as possible. Apparently these two modes will be the traditional normal mode, which will see you play the game as you have done up until this point. Whatever you recognise and are familiar with in Breath of the Wild will be present in the sequel. However, there will supposedly be an easier mode. Not easy in the sense that the enemies will not be as tough, won't hit as hard, you'll do more damage, nothing like that. That much will be the same as normal, but supposedly in this quote-unquote easier mode, items will get double durability, so you'll basically be breaking swords and shields considerably less frequently. Apparently Nintendo are supposedly tweaking this to kind of find the right balance, and they've even toyed out with the idea of some items being completely unbreakable, and then others just being, you know, considerably more durable to just try and kind of give you a slightly less frustrating experience. If that's ultimately the only change and everything else is still pretty much the same, then at least it gives people more of a chance to play maybe in a more traditional sense, more traditional Zelda sense. You know, you don't have to worry about your items breaking, and you can then go from there. Now, obviously, outside of that, we know that Monolith are also involved in the development. They're, of course, assisting with a lot of the Breath of the Wild 2 stuff. They have since expanded their team to work on additional things. There have been adverts for character modelers, concept art designers, map modelers, and scenario planners, specifically for a new Zelda game. And, of course, with hiring extra hands, it just kind of goes to show that they are putting a lot of efforts into this game. But, again, that much goes without saying. So that's kind of all we have for the time being. That's a little rundown on some of the rumours for Breath of the Wild 2. Again, keep in mind, take all of that with a huge pinch of salt. As I always say, until it comes from Nintendo, nothing is true, but some of that stuff is rather interesting and some of it is potentially plausible. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of those ideas. Let me know if you like any of those ideas, and of course, be sure to keep it locked for plenty more. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there if you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with. It's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.